What would it be like if your sex life was even more satisfying? What if your next sexual experience and orgasm actually felt more powerful than ever before? In this episode, we are covering the number one way to have more fulfilling and satisfying sex. Welcome back to The Naked Connection. This is the show for driven men to reach sexual mastery and build deep connections. It's Kirsten here, your soon to be licensed sex therapist. And in order to dive into making sex even better, we have a special guest, Magda Kay, onto the show. And today she is here to share how to build more intimacy into your life and sexual experiences. You guys, let's get some. Magda Kay, welcome to The Naked Connection.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Everyone, before we hit record, we were already talking about so many amazing things, and we're going to rekindle that conversation for you guys in talking about understanding women. And Magda, you were sharing this really interesting perspective, and I'm curious if you could share it with the community of guys here.
Both of us, we are rooted in tantric teachings, and I think they're beautiful. It's full of, it's mystical, it's esoteric. I think it's magical, and I really think this is what sexuality really is about. But then one of the things I just keep seeing everywhere online is that women are a mystery, and so you don't have to understand her. Like, stop trying to understand her and just appreciate her. Just like enjoy her presence when she talks. Just like, David Data says this too, just like, you don't even have to understand what she says, just listen to the beauty of her voice. And I say it's BS. I think it's a very convenient excuse for not to make an effort to understand someone who is different than you. Like, women are very different than men, and we don't make sense to a typical man, but it doesn't mean that we don't make sense. It's just our logic is different. So women are not as mysterious. Like, for example, like, do you ever get shocked by like how another woman behaves? Like
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
but we understand how we operate. It's like, oh, okay, she's emotional. Like, I maybe wouldn't do it, but like I can understand why a woman would give a man silent treatment, or why she would suddenly start yelling at him.
Mhm.
I may not agree with this, but like, I know why she does this. I know why a woman may say yes and then change her mind, because I am aware of what happens. And for men operate differently, men think differently. And so it's very easy to look at a woman and just decide, well, she's different than me, so I'm not going to make any effort to understand her. I'm just going to think that she's this beautiful mystery that I don't have to understand. Because to understand a woman, yes, you got to put in some work. But I always say this: look at nature, because nature is feminine. Do you ever wake up in December and notice snow and get shocked? Oh my God, what is this doing here? Why did the weather change? Because you know that the weather changes. So women move in cycles. And if you understand how cycles operate, then you will be able to understand her and predict her, right? But no one says that nature is chaotic or doesn't make sense or is crazy. Like, nature is incredible. Like, it's full of gifts and magic. But again, we're not shocked that something happens. We may not be able to predict when a volcano erupts, but we know that sometimes volcanoes erupt, and we know why. And it's same with women.
Mm. Yeah. I love the comparison with nature. So, in understanding that, you said it can be work. What does that work look like to understand someone's cycles?
Look, to be fair, I would say this is kind of similar to any form of communication, like proper, open, conscious communication.
Mm.
So if you ever disagree on something with another human being, if you ever argue with them, like, what do you have to do? You have to try your best not to take things personally. So don't add your own meaning. You have to try to understand where the person is coming from. So what is their reality? What is their past? Like, why would they choose to do something even more when you wouldn't choose to do that, right? Like, get curious, ask questions, don't jump into conclusions, don't make assumptions. And so it's the same here, because essentially we're talking about a form of communication between men and women, which is not only spoken, but it's through how we treat each other. So it's exactly the same thing, it's just like stretch yourself a little bit. It's, I don't know, maybe like learning a new language, right? Like there are different logics, and in different languages the order of the words is totally different.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, forget about what you already know, because it's just your perspective, it's not the absolute truth, and just get curious where she is coming from and what it means for her. Just be more open-minded. But yes, like keeping an open mind, right? And not jumping into conclusions that we automatically would want to. Yes, that takes some energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I find, even, I know we're talking about men understanding women, but I find for myself, if I come from that place of wondering, oh, why would like a partner or a guy that I'm seeing, or just a person, do something or engage a certain way, as soon as I actually allow myself to be a little curious, then I understand them better, or ask a question, and then they usually have some very logical reasoning that maybe it doesn't match my logic, but it makes sense. And then I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand what's actually happening here. And can,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, because it's
beautiful.
not about looking. I think this is exactly like you said, like we do it all the time,
Hmm.
because we look at life a certain way. And so when
Yeah.
I talk about being curious, and I do mean it from both sides, like women, let's get curious about men, men, let's get curious about women, or really, let's get curious about our partner, right? No matter the
Hmm.
gender. It's it's something I think that's just really, really helpful for all of us to cultivate, in every day, as in this idea that the reality that I perceive is only mine. No one on this planet shares the same
Yeah.
perception. We can find people with whom we are very similar, but then we jump into the conclusion thinking we're going to agree on everything. And I think sometimes even with couples, like I don't know if you've had this, I've definitely had that happen to me. I would meet a guy with whom, like, we just seemed so similar, very
Mhm.
similar views and beliefs and approach to life. And then when you finally discover where you don't agree, then you just don't know what to do with this, because you thought, wait, so are we not meant to be together because we disagree on that one aspect of
Mhm.
life? So I think it's something really good to cultivate for all relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so funny. I was a swimmer growing up, and when I was in college, my coach one day, I don't remember the context of this, but he told me, your perception is your reality. And this was, I'm like 19 years old. So I have like at this point in my life, I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm like, that sounds like mumbo jumbo. And then I fast forward to like a decade later, and I understand what he's saying. And it's so true when we recognize that our own perception is our reality, and everyone else is living in their own reality. Like none of us are actually in the same reality. So when you recognize that, it's like, oh, it's easier to understand why someone may make a choice or have a perspective that's different than yours. And
Mhm.
that's just like a helpful way to navigate life and relationships, it seems like. Yeah. Well, I'm like totally shifting gears here, but I know you have so much knowledge about intimacy. And I'm curious, just to start off, if you can explain, because this is something I think we kind of get lost in the words of like, what is the difference between intimacy and sex?
Well, you're asking what's the difference. Like, these are two totally different concepts. They, in fact, have very little to do with each other. It's just that they may happen at the same time,
Ah,
but they
uh-huh.
also don't have to. So I like to define it this way. Sex is just something we do, right? It's one of the things we do in life. Intimacy is how we do. Okay,
Mm,
it's not a what, it's a how. And specifically, the way I like to define intimacy is that it's the depth of your experience of life.
mm,
So it's everything, right? Of course, you can bring intimacy into the bedroom, and goodness, I really hope you do. Because sex without intimacy, well, it's either bad sex, or it's just far, far, far away from the potential of what you could be experiencing. But intimacy, I think this is really a big problem, because we are sexualizing intimacy. But if you think a child and a mother, what they share is intimacy.
mhm,
Intimacy can happen between friends. And again, because we have sexualized it, this is actually a massive issue for men, because we still live with these kind of crazy ideas that if you see two boys or two men together, like close and intimate with each other, you assume, oh, they're gay, and still that's like a bad label, right, in our society. So men have like stayed away from being intimate with their friends because of how we would potentially label them. And so I think this is actually a really serious thing to take into consideration, because intimacy is actually a basic human need. So let me explain what I mean by this. We actually have studies, they were not done specifically for intimacy, but what we've discovered is that without intimacy, we will literally die. And so we know that we need that depth, that connection with another human being, not just for mental health, but also physical health. Like literally, it's like we're gonna get sick. We're gonna die if we don't have that need met. But the truth is that you will actually survive without sex. Your life may not be as amazing, but you will. You will. And so I think by combining these two terms into one, we are doing ourselves the service, because we are disconnecting ourselves from a lot of healthy ways how we could be meeting our need for intimacy that would not necessarily have anything to do with sex. I'll tell you more. You don't need a romantic relationship to experience intimacy in life. I mean, look, I think a great example is if you look at religion. I come from a Catholic country, so in our religion, priests and nuns, they have to be celibate. They're not in romantic relationships, but they have developed an incredibly deep, intimate relationship with God. So they don't feel alone. You can source the sense of intimacy from a lot of different places in life. And so this is why I like talking more about intimacy, because once we can awaken your ability to feel life on a deeper level, then automatically sex gets better. Like it's not about a new sex position. A sex position is never going to fix your sex life, and it's never going to take it to like, God knows how great level. That's not it. These are logistics. What really changes the experience of sex is exactly how deeply can you be present with it, with your body, with your mind, with your emotions, your energy, your heart. And that is literally what intimacy opens for us.
Ooh, that was so beautiful. Okay, so knowing that and understanding that, how do we invite more intimacy into our lives? Like, where does someone begin? Because I can imagine, and I just think I look at a lot of statistics, and especially looking at, a lot of men are lacking in male friendships, and a lot of people are more isolated. So many studies show how there's, like this loneliness epidemic where people feel lonely most of the time for various reasons. So whether it's in a romantic relationship or not, how do we build more intimacy into our life?
So I want to share two concepts for this. So the first one is, I talk about the three pillars of intimacy, or like kind of sources of intimacy where we can find it. So the first one is our relationships with other people. The second is the relationship with myself. And the third is relationship with life.
Yeah.
So the first one, this is your relationship with all of your friends, your romantic partner, if you have one, or any other lovers, your family, your colleagues, even strangers on the street. Now, notice that a romantic relationship is just one subcategory of that pillar. And a romantic relationship is not any of the pillars. So we really overvalue the importance of a romantic relationship. We think that like this is the main source, well, it's not even 1/3 of how we can source intimacy. So if you don't have a romantic relationship, totally don't worry. Yes, there are some unique benefits, absolutely, that we only get when we are in a good relationship. But still, this is not the only source. So look at all the people that you have. And I think, especially these days, like you said, I know a lot of people are single. A lot of people also don't necessarily want to date or be in a relationship. So I would say that this is actually a really good time for men to start creating deeper friendships with women. Because I know that when you're in a relationship, this either like men just are not interested in being friends with women anymore, because maybe they were friends with them because they were looking for a lover or a partner, or maybe their girlfriend wouldn't really approve of. But now you have the space. And again, a lot of women are single, so they will appreciate this friendship as well, because having this polarity actually feels really good, you know? So totally go for friends with women, for men, and for women, go for friends with men. Like allow that wherever you feel the polarity, allow that. So that's number one. Number two is the relationship with self. And this is, you know, whether it's doing things that you're really passionate about, following your true mission and calling in life, contributing, meditating, speaking to yourself, but like actually have this relationship, which a lot of people don't. Like most people are externally focused, and we have no idea what our body, what our soul is trying to tell us. So that is a incredibly beautiful and important source. And then lastly, it's the relationship with life. And so for me, for example, it's something I feel when I am in nature, and it's observing what nature really is, what a life is, what it means to be alive, and like watching the cycles of nature, watching the fact that nature can be very cruel. Like animals can kill each other. Some animals kill each other for fun, and that's it. And like, you know, so how do I feel about it? And this is also where we can talk about the relationship with divine, God, consciousness, again, whatever feels good to a person. So first of all, I would say, if you want more intimacy in life, like actually look at these three areas, you know. So that's one aspect I think that's really important. And then the second one is, well, what specifically do we do? And I think here, when we talk about building relationships with other people, I think here it's where, well, we need a bit of help, because, you know, like you know very well, it's not something that we teach people. Like education system
Yeah.
spends literally zero time on that.
Wow.
So a few things that I recommend to people is, number one is ask better questions. And this is especially if you want to build more intimacy with a new person, a stranger, or it's your first date. Because, you know, we feel very uncomfortable because we don't know what to say. And then we end up asking, how are you? So what do you do? Where do you come from? And these are really kind of questions when you're just like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
So get a bit more creative with those questions. For example, when I catch up with my friends, I haven't like talked to them for a while. I don't ask them, hey, how are you? Because it's like, how do you really answer this question, right? So instead, I usually ask them, okay, what's the most exciting thing in your life right now? So I try to be more specific about, you know, what kind of emotions I want you to think of. So it's a very simple question here. So we can start with better questions. The second thing is, especially if you already have a relationship with the person, is to look into their eyes more. Now, don't stare, because this can be threatening. We don't want to stare. Like every now and then, do look away, because probably the other person may not feel very comfortable with this. But really challenge yourself to look into the person's eyes and allow them to see you. Like the reason why we feel uncomfortable doing it is because it's so intimate. And so exactly this why we want to do it. And then the next one is that the third tip is touch. It's all the little touches, and I'm talking about non-sexual touch. But you know, like we actually really need this. You know, when you walk through the city and you even bump into people or something, or you're you know, taking the metro and like you're kind of squeezing with people. As annoying as it may sometimes feel, we actually need this. We need that contact. And so if you're with someone with whom you want more intimacy, do it more consciously. Like embrace them, hug them, caress them. You can, you know, depending on the level of your relationship, you can touch their cheek, touch their face, you know, maybe like massage their belly a little bit, squeeze their thighs, like just like invite more loving, gentle, conscious touch, because this immediately builds more connection. So this is like, you know, 3 things that we can start doing quite easily, because they're very little things, you know, but they will really make a difference.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much in this. Yeah, I will never forget in the very beginning of COVID when like I lived alone at the time, and there was like a 2-week period where I didn't come into physical contact with anyone, like not even a hug or a handshake or a high five, like nothing. And I remember physically, I was like, I could feel that like in my body, like, wow, this is really absent, and how important it is to have that, even if it's not necessarily a sexual exchange, just having that physical exchange with even strangers, how important it is. I love that you mentioned this piece about the relationship with life, because I think a lot of the times that gets so missed, and we're so focused on, the relationship with ourself, whether it's through like self-improvement or discovery or whatever have you, and then looking externally at how we're engaging with other people. So I love that you mentioned that, because it's such an important piece of, it isn't just ourselves and other people. There's this whole other piece of existence that is
Yeah.
unfolding around us constantly. Yeah.
Yes, and I think this one, I know this one may be a bit challenging to people because it's not very tangible. Like already relationship with yourself can be like a big step for most people. And here we're
Yeah.
going even beyond that. But I will tell you, okay, so there's the saying that the whole conversation, does God exist or not? And I heard this thing, I mean, it's not, no one said it now, it's like a quote from a long time ago, but it was that if God didn't exist, it didn't exist, we would have to invent him. As in,
Mhm.
like, we have the need for something bigger. And for as long as we know that humans have been on this planet, we've always had some form of spirituality because we
Mhm.
actually have the need for this. And so I actually remember, like, I would have often conversations with my father who's just like, no, this doesn't exist, etc. And I look at it, it's like, I don't care, like, if it makes sense or not. I don't care if it's logical or not. What I care about is that it makes me more peaceful and happier.
Mhm.
And I think that can take any form for people. It's like, I think this part, it's really up to each person how you want to do this one.
Mhm.
um but I was even discussing with my best friend today about our grandparents who are getting older and older, and we were talking about the fact that uh, we don't want to talk about death. But
Mhm.
like, if you're in your late 80s or 90s, like, how can you not think about it? And yet people
Yeah.
avoid it. But I think, for example, contemplating on death, on the fact that we are all going to die, this is how you build that intimate relationship with life.
Yeah.
So I understand it's very scary. And even, you can look at this if you're single and you really want to be in a relationship, and exploring, why am I single on like a deeper level? What if
Mhm.
there was a deeper meaning to me being single, or to this relationship just ending? I think just like opening your mind for more concepts, that you're not meant to understand it. You're just
Mhm.
meant to feel. You're meant to notice that you're part of something bigger, right? Because this is the connection, which all the spiritual paths talk about, the sense of oneness. Because notice, that's why we get into relationship, that's why we have sex, because of this incredible sense of oneness, merging into one. And you can merge into one with a lot of things.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, okay. So if we were to take this intimacy, let's say that we're building this intimacy in our life in all of the different ways, and we want to bring it into sex, making
Mhm.
it juicy. How, like, where do you like to have people start?
Yes, mostly. So I predominantly work with heterosexual couples.
Mhm.
So this will definitely be true here. But if you're in any other form of a relationship, usually we still notice that there is polarity. So energetically, we're like on two opposites, and the one person will usually be a bit more in the feminine, softer, receptive energy. So this will be true for basically anyone with this energy. And sometimes it's also like around, maybe not as often, but sometimes it's the man who's more in this energy in a relationship. But just please allow me for like simplicity to speak about women.
Mhm.
So what I always say is that start by giving your woman more space, because a woman needs to feel safe to open up. And if she doesn't open up, then just sex doesn't really work in a relationship. So and like all the men, you probably will will agree that when your woman is like in absolute bliss, your pleasure is much deeper. Like you are enjoying yourself better. So let's make sure that the woman gets everything she needs, and she invites the man more into his body. So the person who's more vulnerable, who's more receptive, softer, she will be the one inviting the other person into their body and into the deeper state of intimacy. But for that person, like usually the person who maybe doesn't feel that comfortable with intimacy, this person will usually try to rush things and be very intense, right? And the person who wants more intimacy, they will want to slow down. And so listen to the person who wants to slow down. It's not to say that sex always has to be slow. I mean, I like quickies. I think everyone does. So it's not that. It's not that now this is how you have to do it every single time. It's more about the ability to step into that slower energy. Okay, I can step into this and enjoy it, and I also can step out of it, move faster, be more intense, and enjoy it. It's about being able to move between these two energies. But when you slow down and soften, you're actually allowing your body to feel more. So like a very common pattern when we have sex is we're building up the tension, right? It's like we're speeding up when you're like getting close to an orgasm, you're tensing, and then you're speeding up even more. Very often your breath becomes more shallow and shorter, or you can even hold your breath because it increases that intensity in the body. And then it's like build up, and then there is release. And that's ejaculation for men, and that's for most women clitoral orgasm. But that, and it's a great experience. I'm not saying it's bad, by the way. I think it's a great experience. But that is not what we are talking about here. I'm talking about doing the opposite and trying to relax and soften into all of the sensations. So when you feel your body wanting to tense, relax. Like relax. When your breath becomes shorter, lengthen it. Now, I will be honest, when you start doing this, for the person who's like more intense and wants to move faster, you may get like frustrated, you may kind of lose your arousal. It's like, oh my God, I was getting there and now I lost it, because you're addicted or you're dependent on intensity to reach your peak. You're teaching your body a new skill, and at the beginning, and with anything, you know, we have to figure out a way to get there. Like at first we're not getting this, so at first it may not necessarily feel good, but once you open your body and you teach your body to experience pleasure through softer lovemaking and through slowing down, you'll see that then when you have like faster and more intense sex, the intimacy is going to be deeper. But you learn intimacy by slowing down, and then you can take it into other forms of lovemaking. But to learn it, you have to slow down. So again, make sure to do this, you know, their self-pleasure practice. But if one of you is in that energy, and often one person will be, right? Then allow this person to lead, like adjust to that tempo. And again, in many relationships, this will be the woman. So don't judge her. If she's asking for like 30-minute foreplay, just every now and then do it and see what can come out of this, both for her and for you.
Yeah. Okay. So thinking about this prolonged foreplay, where do we go? What do we
Okay.
do?
I always tell, and this is like, well, this is mostly for men, but to be fair, with women, we have not received sexual education. And I also see women stubbornly saying, no, this is what I like, this is what it is. And I'm just like, often it's not. You're holding on to certain like beliefs or concepts that were given to your whole life, but challenge this. So for all the women, challenge what you think that your truth is when it comes to sex. And I know especially women get triggered when a man tries to tell them something different. But again, I'll say, if this man is really trained in sacred sexuality, just consider what they're saying. But this is mostly for men. Oral sex is not foreplay. Okay, oral sex is already sex. Now it may feel like foreplay for a man, but it's already sex for a woman, meaning a woman needs foreplay before oral sex. And in fact, I would say that foreplay for a woman is anything that happens before you touch her breasts and her genitals. So before you actually get properly sexual with her. And I know, because I think you spoke about this in your podcast as well. Like it starts, like basically the moment you stop making love, that's when the foreplay begins. It's like the little things you do throughout the day. Do you message her? Like, it's like if you want her to be in the mood, you got to plant the idea of sex in her mind hours before. Like for a man, right? It's like a man can be working and then suddenly you bring sex, into his perceptions, like, okay, now I'm ready to have sex. But as women, we don't work like that. It's like we don't jump from one thing to another like that. We soften into something. So for me as a woman to be available for a quickie, and I may be available for a quickie, it's only if I've been thinking of having sex with you for the last few hours, or ideally a full day. So as a partner, well, plant those ideas in her head. Let's like, buy her sexy lingerie, or like send her, like some nudes or like some sexy messages throughout the day, and trust me, she will be thinking about sex, and she will be very, very ready the moment you both are back home and ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're saying this, I don't know. There's this movie that came out a few years ago. It was about these magicians and how they basically I think it was like the Imitation Game or something. I forget, but it was these four magicians, and they would basically set up all of these cues throughout the day to prompt the people in the audience to subconsciously like think of a number, or like, and they would like learn their bank account. There's all these different things. And basically by the time the audience would show up at the show, they would have been primed to be prepared for this like so-called magic to unfold. And so I'm thinking like that's basically what's happening
Yeah.
here. It's like we're programming the mind to like be prepared for a
Okay.
quickie or for just sex in general by the time that rolls around.
Exactly. Yes. And I'll say this because again, I understand that for women, we're like, we think about this, right? Like it's on our mind, and maybe for many it isn't. So I'm like, look, for anyone, if it's not on your mind, then just you can set a reminder on your phone. Like it's okay,
Yeah.
it's really not a problem if you like, use technology to assist you.
Hmm.
So yeah, so like I really don't like the excuse like, oh, I forgot. Okay, so what can you do, to make sure it
Mm-hmm.
happens? Like, because at the end of the day, what matters is whether you do these things, right? So again, it's like what we talked about at the beginning. Sometimes it will take a bit of work, but I'm so big on this because when I hear from, and I unfortunately do hear this, and I get a lot of comments like this in my YouTube channel. It's like, oh, it's too much work. And I always say, if really any of the things that I recommend, if you think, like honestly, if you think that this is too much work, then please don't ever get into a relationship. It's like,
Mm.
how can you? It's like, if I love someone, like if I really love someone, I want to be doing things for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I want to go like out of my way. I want to make an effort for someone. Like if you ever find yourself in a place where like you think that sending, let's say, 3 messages throughout the day to your partner is too much, then really reevaluate, why are you in this relationship? Because it sounds like you want to only take,
Mm.
because I'm not talking here about some massive action.
Yeah.
I'm talking about some small tips. So again, if you find yourself, forgetting, then set the alarm, or like, just find a way that will allow you to make it happen. Please make an effort. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that's a great foreplay for a woman, seeing that you're making an effort for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would think of it in the sense of that, of course, you're giving to your partner by being thoughtful and prompting these things throughout the day. And you're also giving to yourself because you'll be receiving what you ultimately desire as well in return. Like with the assumption that it goes well. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, absolutely. It's like, the giving and receiving must be equal in a relationship for that relationship to feel good. If
Yeah.
it's not, it becomes a toxic relationship. The
Yeah.
only thing is that giving and receiving doesn't happen at the same time. So we
Mm.
have to take like a longer period of time and then look at whether this is equal. But if someone ever like steps into this energy, oh, I'm not going to do something because you're not doing something for me, well, then we have a bigger issue now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess in thinking about this and understanding like that, yeah, this is work and it does take intention and time. What would you say for a couple that maybe isn't having as much sex anymore, or maybe they have kids and it's become harder to have sex, or like just or life circumstances, they both have busy jobs. Like how do you get out of that cycle of less intimacy, less sex back into more sex and intimacy?
Um, I love this question. And I actually work a lot with couples that just recently welcomed a child. And
Mm,
when you become parents, young parents, it totally changes the dynamic. And then I've also worked with couples where mostly, but not in all cases, a woman just didn't really want to have sex as much as the man wanted to. And then
mhm,
it creates all of this dynamic where a man gets frustrated, right? And he's like, oh, you never want to have sex with me. And then she feels pressured. And so there are all of these like different issues that happen. So I would say there's two things that I take my clients through that I feel are the most important. The first one is don't be afraid to schedule sex, schedule dates, like actually approach your intimate life like this. And then second is whoever is the person who doesn't want to have sex, figure out why not and solve that. So
mm,
let me describe both of these. So the first one is about scheduling. People have this incredible resistance to scheduling sex. And if you go back to the dating phase or the honeymoon, you were scheduling dates and you know that sex would happen on
mm,
that date. It
uh-huh.
was exactly the same thing. And did you ever think of like, oh my God, it's so boring. He just messaged me to ask me out this Friday. Like, oh goodness, we're scheduling things.
Yeah. Usually you're like, yay, he's scheduling things. He's thinking
Yeah,
ahead.
right? Like we get excited that, oh my God,
Yeah.
he or she wants to see me. And what happens? Anticipation.
Mhm,
So desire, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone has watched the famous talk by Esther Perel, right? We all know
mhm,
desire needs space,
mhm,
but space can happen like physical space, but there can be also space in time,
mm,
right? So if I tell you, hey, tonight or this weekend, we're going to go on a sexy date and have sex. Now we have distance, we have space, now we have anticipation.
mm,
I think what will maybe help is that instead of scheduling sex per se,
mhm,
schedule sexy time or schedule
mm,
a date. Because I think if I think, for example, oh, I'm gonna like take care of kids or do my work, and oh my God, now it's time for sex. I think people just kind of jump, from
mhm.
one thing to another, and they're like, no, I don't want to have sex like that. Well,
Yeah.
it's not about this. Like you're scheduling, or you could say like schedule foreplay and then see if it's going to lead to sex, right? So I think this can help. But I think honestly scheduling, it's like, I mean, think about it. Everything that's important gets scheduled in the life of an adult,
Yeah.
right? Like your doctor's appointments, like everything gets scheduled. So why would this one part of our lives not?
Mhm.
So absolutely, please, please, please schedule. And
Yeah.
again, if the idea of scheduling sex feels really off, then schedule sexy time or schedule
Mhm.
a romantic evening, right? Like change the phrase
Yeah.
that you're using to kind of limit the resistance. So
Yeah.
that's one.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I could see how I like the reframing of the wording. Cause as you're describing it, it's like, yeah, I could see there would be resistance to being like, oh, here's this hour where we're going to have sex. And it feels very like checklisty and like no one, like that's not sexy. But if you're like, hey, for these few hours, we're going to have a sexy experience, like whatever that may be, then it kind of shifts the way that you look at the scheduling aspect of it. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes, and maybe again, this may be something that would be more needed for women because we really do
Mhm.
not like jumping to sex from something very different, right? We
Yeah.
need that easing into the experience. But yes, I've seen both men and women resistant to this. So
Yeah.
so that's number one. And then number two, and this is really the big one, what I mentioned is that the person whose libido is lower, whose desire is lower, for whatever reason they don't want to have sex as much,
Mhm.
understand what is blocking their sexual desire and eliminate it. So in most cases, this person is not getting their needs met, and some of their boundaries are being crossed. And so the person doesn't feel safe. And so they're shutting down sexually. So, like I said, in most situations, but not only, in most situations, my clients that came to me with this issue, had the situation that a woman didn't really want to have sex. And then he did, and he's getting frustrated and he's kind of pressuring her. And so what happens in these situations is that women, we often feel like we give, and we're not appreciated. And so when sex is something like she doesn't really want to do, and then he wants it and he pressures her, for a woman, it turns into, well, yet another thing that is all about him. And so for women, like if you like try to convince her to have sex when she doesn't want to, it like you're making things way worse. So what I always tell my couples here is like, look, you have to be patient. Well, you're not getting your sexual needs met anyways. So it's not gonna get worse. It's gonna get progressively better, but we have to take it slowly and instead focus on what she needs to feel loved, admired, beautiful, appreciated, seen, validated. And when a woman feels that, her libido naturally opens up. So you're not fixing the problem of how much sex you're having. You're fixing all of the other things that make her want to pull away from you because she doesn't feel safe, essentially. Now, like I said, I've seen this the other way around as well. I've worked with couples when a man was more shut down sexually, but again, there was some story, there was some trauma that was causing his sexuality to be closed down. So in any case, when a person, if this person, like especially if they used to have more sex and now they don't, something stopped working for them. Find that, and then the desire to have sex will come back.
Yeah, I love hearing that. Amazing. Well, okay, and thinking about everything that we've talked about today, is there anything that you feel like we haven't addressed or that you want to add on to for all of the amazing men listening?
Yes.
Perfect.
So I really, like, it's not that I believe, I am convinced, I know this as a fact, that the way our society understands sexuality is extremely limited. And we, like, when it comes to female sexuality, it's almost like we don't know anything. When it comes to male sexuality, we've turned men pretty much into like simple animals, right? Yes or no, kind of like machines almost. And we've turned male sexuality into something similar. And I would like to invite every single man to consider that your sexuality is so much more than what you're experiencing now. That your sexuality may not even be about ejaculation, that your sexuality may not have to be about an erection. It's like, take your sexuality and your sex out of your genitals, spread it through your whole body, like literally and figuratively. Explore more. Like, when I work with men, and I used to offer lingam massages, I don't do this now. I don't do as much body work, but I still will like teach men practices to be able to experience this. Like, I guide men to have a full body orgasm or energy orgasm or experience orgasmic waves without even your genitals being touched. Like, as a man, you're so much more than what society kind of wants you to be. You're way more complex. There's so much depth in men. But again, the definition of masculinity is not giving men a lot of space to explore that. Explore your emotions. I'm pretty sure you've trained in this as well, but you can feel angry or stressed, and you can use that energy and then transmute it into orgasmic pleasure. Now, this is something that women do very often because women are very in tune with our emotions, but like, well, every human being has emotions. It's not that only women have that. Yes, our hormones are different. We feel it more. But as a man, you have emotions. So would you ever even consider like allowing yourself to feel them even more instead of suppressing and hiding them, but like allow yourself to feel this anger or the fear even more and more and more, so you can go into like full body orgasmic experience from that. So start expanding your definition of sexuality and start merging it with your life. Like I always say, sexuality is not a separate room in your house that you sometimes visit. Sexuality is like a floor in that house. It's the foundation of everything. Bring it in. Don't separate it. Bring it in and expand it. That's the full potential.
Oh, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I love that analogy of the floor. Yeah, and honestly, it's funny. People ask me, in starting the show, they're like, "Why is it just like why are you focusing on men?" And this is one of the pieces in all of when I was studying and learning everything about sex and intimacy, I was finding this so true about there's all of these spaces for women and all of this expansion for women. And I'm like, where is this for men? Because I know that it exists. And the more I learned about men, the more I recognize, oh, this is completely available for men. And it isn't something that's as widely being shared. So I love that you brought that up. Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, Magda, thank you so much for being here. Where can everybody find you if they want to work with you, learn more about the work that you do?
So just Google my name, Magda Kay, Magda Kay. There's one other Magda Kay that you may find. She's a DJ. I am not a DJ. So anything that is not about music, that's going to be me. So you can find my website. It's magdakay.com, and I have all the information about the courses. I have courses specifically for men about non-ejaculation and much, much more. Also, if you would like to work one-on-one, this is available. Then you're going to find me on YouTube. I have a lot of content. I love YouTube. So I have a lot of content, a lot of videos for men. It's again, Magda Kay. YouTube is Magda Kay Official, because Magda Kay was taken. Don't you just hate it? But yes, just feel free to connect with me on through any of the platforms. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, Magda Kay, thank you so much. You're such a joy, and I'm excited for everybody to tune in and connect with you more.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Naked Connection. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Trust me on this, your sex life and that special someone in your life will thank you for it. And if you really love the show, please take a moment and leave a 5-star review or a written review and let me know what you think. It would mean so much to me and this show. Until next time, happy connecting.